Sorry, I'm late. I had to put some books so that I could teleport here.
Backlog, Teammate Hat.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Backlog Activated. I am Pat Nat, and today I'm joined by Weirdo Maxim. So much books and teleporting in our day-to-day lives, which is why Newfound Courage is a great example of day-to-day lives. Would you like to talk about Newfound Courage?
Sure. Newfound Courage is... How do I even explain Newfound Courage? That's what I say every time, every game, actually. This is going to be a bit unique one, because Newfound Courage is a adventure-like game. Think of it as like Legend of Zelda kind of things, because for you had to walk around, you had to figure out what is happening, and it has its own story. It's about a boy named Alexander who basically ran away from his town because of homophobic people, because our little Alexander here is gay, and he tried to be in a relationship. It didn't work out. He ran away and he went to another town. Is it a town or a village? Whatever. It's something. It's
a collection of people.
People. He went to it. He lived there, and around that time, he started to work in a bookshelf or something. But during that bookshelf, something is happening. Like, something doesn't happen. These spirits are going around, and then suddenly mayhem happens, and now you are the mechmancer or something, and then it's your job to protect the town while figure out what the hell is going on.
Right. Yeah, that's the best explanation I think I could give. Well, first of all, I think the thing I like to start with what sticks out to me the most, right? Something that sticks out to me the most for sure is the music, which just does not stop being absolutely melodic and symphonic, if that's even a word. And it fits the tone perfectly. It's honestly, I think a big part that's delivering the narrative is the music. I think without it, you'd have a narrative that's not as impactful, basically. I think, okay, so it's a narrative-driven game. It's almost like a visual novel, but without necessarily as much choice in dialogue, but more physical input, meaning you move places and you interact with objects, right? But it follows the same principles as a visual novel, which is emphasizing narrative and dialogue through music and getting you emotionally invested in the relationships of the characters themselves. Of course, the primary...
just saying that if some of you are a bit confused, think like those RPG Maker games. It's pretty much close to that, but it has its own... It has its own program. Unity is what they're using, and own sprite. But basically, it's kind of like the RPG Maker kind of story being told.
Right. But it's worth mentioning I don't know necessarily what... I don't think I've played many RPG Maker games, but it's worth mentioning this isn't an RPG by any sense of the means. It is a one-track narrative that you control the speed at which dialogue comes to you, and then you solve a couple of basic puzzles / mini games in a way. They don't really feel like puzzles. It's more just small doses of dopamine, I guess. Just like tiny little interactions to keep the story progressing. And normally this is not my style of game because I've mentioned a lot of times I like my games a little bit quicker. When things take a little bit of a slower turn, I'm like, ooh, okay, I kind of just want to press the A button really fast. But of course, with narrative games, you can't really do that. You have to take in the narrative because that's where the brunt of the value is. And in terms of story building, there was never a point where I felt, disengaged. I never felt like, oh my gosh, I'm so bored of the story or anything like that. It seemed like it was pacing itself relatively nicely. Even dialogue was usually relatively straight to the point, which someone like me appreciates. I think maybe if there was something that was making me want a little bit more, it was possibly a little bit more interaction with the town. The primary way of exploring lore in this game is through lore books, right? admittedly, I didn't read the lore books, but that's just because that's not usually my method of taking in information when I play games. I don't usually like to read long things of dialogue. But what I do usually like to do is kind of talk with the townsfolk and learn a little bit more about them and their ideals and stuff like that. And I feel like that's something maybe this game could have had a little bit more of, was the physical town itself. But I do understand it wants to really scope in on the main relationship of Alex and Jake, I think his name was, right?
Yep.
I had a question for you, because I got really confused by this. The introduction, it's all taking place from the point of view of Alex's sister, right?
I thought it was Alex's father.
At some point it was like, oh wait, was it father? I thought it was a sister.
Well,
I guess that's the point of confusion, right? Because at this whole point, like you start having a certain point of view, and then once you play it, you're like, oh wait, I am this kid. This is the kid, right? And it's like, oh, this is Alexander. But also, like, I don't think they even mentioned the kid by name in the introduction, so I was pretty confused as to like who I was playing and exactly what happened. But then there was also Nora. Maybe was it from the perspective of Nora?
We
it
don't
definitely wasn't
know.
the perspective of Alex. So yeah, it's a little bit of a bizarre way to get you into the story.
Yeah.
But that's a small part of the game. It's just an introduction. But it asks you questions, like yes or no questions of like, do you protect him or do you go away with it, or different stuff. And sometimes I was just like, I don't know what these both sound the same to me. But what I'm wondering is whether or not that actually had an influence on the game itself. Because if those moments didn't have an influence, then I don't think any of the dialogue choices did have influence.
I think this is one of those what we like to call the Mass Effects option. Well, basically
Right.
you have two multiple options, but they both lead the same route. But we can actually find out together because we probably pick different answers. So
that's true. I mean, I don't think I had any narrative moments that seemed out of the, like, I think all my narrative moments have been the same, or like the coin game, right? Do you remember the coin game?
Oh yeah, the coin game was
Even
definitely
that's definitely fixed.
that was definitely fixed.
Definitely fixed. So I think that's something that like tends to bother me a little bit, is just presenting choices if it's choice when it's not. Because I don't think it's inherently wrong to have a game without dialogue choice. But this idea of only getting one response line different is a little bit strange, especially for a narrative based game, because a bulk of the game is just dialogue in your face. And if you can't actually alter it, then why is it making you alter it? Why is it giving you options to do it? And I know it's a small thing, but
And truthfully speaking, I'm gonna be honest here, the intro kind of was gonna like almost push me back from playing the game. I mean, I get what they were trying to do with the intro and everything, but if they showed us the sprite at the beginning and then suddenly do that or something, or made just the whole intro with the sprite or something, maybe I would understand it. But the problem with the intro was it was too realistic, I think you could say, because the artwork and everything was too realistic, which I understand they sometimes do it, but the most of the gameplay is sprite, so it's more ideal that you show what you're playing most of the time, and you can also add that in cutscenes and everything, just to have your own touch and everything. I think the presentation could have been a lot better.
It was a weird tonality shift. Like the tonality of the intro to the start of the game felt very bizarre, and we didn't even know whose perspective it was from, right? Like neither of us know that still. But yeah, showing just some footage of at least him going through the town while maybe text overlays it, I think that's what some games have done. I kept thinking about Undertale when playing this, not necessarily because there's a lot of similarities, but Undertale is also a pretty dialogue heavy game, and you're also a stranger in a world you don't recognize fully, right? And a lot of the charm comes from when you interact with any object that you choose to interact with, or any event, right? That, at least that's the idea of the exploration aspect. But when there's not a ton to actually explore, and the things you interact with don't give you as much maybe humor as or interest or depth as some other games, then I think that's where I'm starting to be like, okay, well then I might as well just continue with the story. But if I just continue with the story, that's a lot of non-input gameplay, basically. And I just like to have input in my gameplay. I don't know if how much that made sense, but
I mean, at the beginning of the chapter 1, there's basically introductions where they basically showed you everything. It's only on chapter 2 where the combat system actually starts doing. And as of me playing, I haven't played much of it. There's not much combat. Like, I actually was like, where's the combat? Where's the combat? Where's the combat? Because of curiosity and everything. And I think I had only 3 or 4 combat overall. I leveled up, but only 3 to 4 combats or something.
The combat, and I didn't play that much either, but the combat seemed almost like a rite of passage for the game to exist in the genre that it is. Like, it almost felt like they saw it as a necessity in order for it to be a game that fits a certain criteria, when in reality, you could probably take it out without changing the game. Yeah, it's tough. I definitely didn't hate this game, but I think as I was, having it already be a genre that I'm not interested in, made me more aware of the maybe missed opportunities within the genre, because I have played visual novels before, and even like ones we've played on the show before have introduced certain elements to keep my interest level up, while also still telling a good narrative through it. And I think this game maybe was falling short on certain areas. But I honestly think the narrative itself, I don't think I had any issues with. It was still engaging. I liked the theme of this library, an ancient library with some mysterious secrets and a rift literally, separating certain things and stuff. Like, it's got some excitement, it's got some interest and investment. It was just the way it's packaged as a game felt almost like the game elements were kind of added on just so they could call it a game. I wonder how this would look in other mediums, is what I'm wondering.
I kind of disagree with you, because I do think the combat system was needed based on the whole lore and everything, because you all the wield and everything and you had to fight. I get it at times.
Right.
They could have definitely made the combat better, because from what I played, I'm just thinking back in my mind, how are they gonna make the combat more difficult yet make us more powerful at the same time? Because of the whole combat system was being very simple. Yes, there is like those whole slashing where you can do crit chance, or every time you slash you heal sometimes and everything like that. But there wasn't any thing that could just be like, oh, you could get bigger slash, or maybe you can do faster slash or something. It's probably could be a thing in the future one. I'm probably spouting nonsense here, but at the beginning it just felt like they can't add anything more without killing us.
Well, I guess I'm wondering maybe the reason the gameplay or the combat feels tacked on to me is because it only appears after the first third of the game, right? I'm curious why some of that wasn't introduced early on, even in a more playful sense. Because some games introduced in not necessarily tutorial form, but in fighting enemies that don't matter as much as the enemies that you're going to fight eventually. And even then, it might, if they had done that, it would have gotten me accustomed to the system before even level 2, and then I think the leveling up would feel more meaningful to me. But like, you don't get to that even until a little bit after chapter 2, which is, there's only 3 chapters in the game. So it still seems like a little strange to me. It feels like they're existing side by side, but not coexisting, almost not unified together as one package. But that said, I don't think it was necessarily, a bad time to play the combat. I just think I was wondering, like, I felt like it was almost still looking for its genre. It was still looking for a place to call its home the entire time I was playing. Because it had some strong elements. It had the narrative, and I was like, I just wonder if the way they're delivering this narrative is the best way to do it in terms of gameplay. And I think that's what I just kept thinking about. But
I mean, there is some narratives that I really liked about the game as well. There was a lot of things, introduction to the spirits and everything, which was fine and everything.
Yeah. I also agree. I love the introduction of the strange the wanderings. Is that what they're called?
I don't know.
Something like that.
I forgot.
Just when he's like pulling out the books on the shelf and throwing it on the ground and stuff like that. Like little things like that I was very much enjoying. And also some of the vocabulary felt a little bit more relatable than what you might find in other games. Simple things like just the way he was reacting to the ghosts throwing stuff down, like can you not, and stuff like that. Like that's how you feel when you see that. Like please just stop doing that. Like it's not rage, it's just You're being obnoxious. Stop. I love little things like that. The subtle proper use of vocabulary in everyday life. And so I think that's really where it shines. I think it is a pretty strong narrative overall. It's it just gets a little bit confusing at certain points. And then also, yeah, just finding its footing as a game. I think it maybe didn't fully find the footing yet, because when you're dealing with something that's entirely narrative based and you're making it a game, you have to really think about how the gameplay is going to interact with it. And I think that's what separates really good visual novels from really bad visual novels, is the really good ones find that way to integrate just enough gameplay to make it warrant its existence in the gaming sphere in a way. Not that you have to warrant your existence in a gaming sphere, but it gives you more of a stance, basically. It gives you more of a standing and more of a purpose in a way. So would I recommend, thank you for asking me, would I recommend Newfound Courage? It's kind of weird because it's definitely not my kind of game, and if you have similar taste to me, I definitely recommend just skipping it, because it's going to be kind of a long narrative-based game that if Little Pat is listening, Little Pat probably wants to go play something more engaging. But if you do like visual novels or have more experience with visual novels, maybe that's where Maxim's recommendation might be more helpful.
Yeah, as for me, I would say I 100% recommend it. Yes, the narrative is...
There you go.
Narrative could be better. Like, could be a lot better. Sometimes, and I sometimes feel like maybe they're progressing too fast and maybe I want more combat, but the way they're telling the story, the way they show us, there's something more behind this. And that curiosity, that what could it be, just drives you to go more and more. And the missions are pretty short and pretty simple and achievable. I'm not gonna say it's the best game or good game, but it is a very good game. It's a very good game, and it's definitely a curiosity-driven game, and it's short, straight to the point. It's a fun game. It's a fun game, and I would recommend it.
There you go. You got both foods for thought, and of course you can get more foods of thought when you subscribe and check us out next week for Backlog Activated's latest video, where we talk about a whole nother game. So thank you guys so much for watching. This has been PatNet and Weirdo Maxim, and we'll see y'all in the next one. So long.
Subscribe, otherwise I'll scare you just a bit.